Hello, and welcome to Breakaway, Leadership for a Sound Mind and Body, brought to you by the University of Michigan Leadership Collaborative, a community dedicated to advancing leadership learning across the university for students who seek to develop and progress as leaders. I'm James McCrae, and I'm your guide on this podcast journey. In this series, we're asking you to break away from the norms of your daily routines to explore the challenges that leaders face in developing healthy habits that fuel the mind and body. So I'm inviting you to take this opportunity to do something that you consider active while we engage you mentally. Now, let's join our amazing guests as we break away.
From the Sanger Leadership Center, I'm Nick Viviano, and this is a very special edition of the Story Lab podcast. Today, we have a story taken from one of our live showcases. Every fall and winter semester, we have a showcase featuring 7 to 8 students who develop stories at a Story Lab retreat. They share their stories in front of a live audience. In today's podcast episode, a storyteller from the showcase shares their experiences on a fun night out in West Hollywood and how, by the end of the night, they learned how to trust the kindness of strangers. Today's featured storyteller is Alfred Koo.
Wait, why is your backpack open? I asked my friend. It was at the end of this fantastic party in West Hollywood. The music faded, the light went on. Me and my friend were heading toward the exit with the crowd, trying to avoid all the crushed cans and the spilled drinks on the floor. And then I spot something. The lid of his backpack was flapping up and down as he's walking in front of me. I don't feel good about this. I felt this unsettling chill that creeped over me and it sobered me right up. I reached inside his backpack and my heart stopped. The zipper was open and my entire handbag was gone. You know how in a life-threatening situation, people's lives flash before their eyes? Well, something similar happened to me. But in my case, the images of my possessions in the stolen bag flashed before my eyes one by one. My wallet, my keys, my bracelet, and my passport. I was now frozen in place, like a deer that was caught by a car's headlight. Let's rewind a few weeks back. I just received an invitation to the psychology department's recruitment weekend at UMich. Since UMich was my top choice, I decided to do an early celebration out in West Hollywood with my friends as a toast to my potential new life chapter. As an international student, my passport was the only form of identification that I had, so I brought my passport, that green little booklet, with me when we went out. And of course, who wants to dance with a bag in his hand, right? So I left it with my friend. Little did I know, that decision would lead to a night to remember. Now back to the present. My passport is gone, and it would take at least a month to replace it, but the recruitment weekend was in a week. How am I supposed to fly without my passport? What's going to happen if I miss my recruitment weekend? How can I be so stupid and irresponsible? What am I going to do now? While being haunted by all these chatters in my head, I found myself aimlessly searching for my passport at 3 a.m. in the morning. We went back into the club and tried to find it. We went through every corner of the street. We even looked into every trash can, looking for any sign of that green little booklet, but it was not successful. You know what? Fuck people, I said to my friend. People are selfish. They don't care if others suffer, and they like to take advantage of others, aka stealing my bag. After an hour of unsuccessful search, I decided that we've gone past the golden hour of recovering my passport. So we went to the nearest police station to file a report. I explained what happened to the officer on duty, and he said, "Well, you will have to wait for the sheriff to come in and file a report. It will take at least 30 minutes to an hour for him to come in. You sure you want to wait? From his tone, I could hear that what he meant to say was, there's very little that we could do. But I was already there, so why not just wait for a little while? So I collapsed onto the bench in the police station, showered under the fluorescent light in this exact same outfit, by the way. And then I fell asleep. After who knows how long, I heard some vague footsteps approaching the door, and I heard the door open. Oh, finally, I stood up, ready to dump my story on the sheriff. But wait, you don't look like the sheriff. It was an old man, probably in his early 60s. He was wearing a light blue blazer that was stained, and he had this beanie on that has several holes on it. Wow, can this night be any more disappointing? But then I saw what was in his hand. It was that green little booklet, my green little booklet. I felt the room was lit up entirely, and I was like, is he a messenger from heaven or something? I explained what happened to him, and he said, I found this a few blocks away in a trash can, and I thought I should bring it in because it looks very important. Anyways, I'm glad that you got it back. Have a good night. And then he just walked out. He didn't even ask for anything in return. He just walked out like that. What a roller coaster ride, I told my friend. When we were walking back home, I couldn't help but to keep rethinking about this surreal adventure. After all, what are the odds that my passport was stolen and it was found and returned to me by someone within the same night? And to this day, I keep telling myself that there's a reason why fate knocked on that door and showed up in a blue blazer. It was to remind me that the greatest kindness can arrive at the least expected moment and be delivered by a least expected person. Thank you.
Let's dive deeper. Alfred and I met up after the showcase to talk about the storytelling process, how it felt to get up in front of a live audience to share a personal narrative, and the takeaways he's going to apply to his Ph.D. program. You're coming from the Story Lab stage. You just shared your story. How were you feeling after you finished?
I guess I felt very confident about my story because I've never shared my story in a public setting like that. Usually it would be more about sharing my research or other forms of topics, but sharing my personal story on a public stage was the first time. And it was very rewarding for me because it was an accomplishment for me in my life. And I invited quite a few friends to attend as well. So I was happy to show them what I got and what I've been working on for the past few weeks.
I love that. So I'm hearing confidence, happiness,
Yep.
accomplishment. What did your friends say after hearing your story?
Oh, they were pretty impressed because they've never heard me speaking in a setting like that. And yeah, a lot of them came to me and congratulated me for completing this. So I was happy to hear that.
Compared to the confidence, happiness, accomplishment that you were feeling after you walked off the stage, how are you feeling leading up to sharing your story on stage in front of an audience, friends and strangers both included?
So it was definitely very nerve-wracking at the beginning because there's a lot of unexpected, unknown parts about how I will perform on stage. But eventually I realized when I modified my scripts more and more, and I practiced again and again in front of the mirror, in front of my friends, and so on, I feel like a huge part of that anxiety transforming to excitement because I can see myself performing fluently and smoothly on stage. And I feel like that image becomes clearer and clearer when I polished up my script and my performance. So yeah, it was a huge transformation of my mood.
How did you feel about when you, maybe not so much for yourself in front of the mirror, but when you were delivering it to your friends, when you were practicing with me and you were receiving feedback, how did that feedback feel and how did you go about incorporating it?
So I would say the hardest part of the story crafting process was exactly what you just said. It's like when I first came up with the first draft of my script, and then I received the first round of my feedback from my coach, Stephanie. And I think that was the hardest part because she picked out a lot of details that, or narrative style that wasn't, that didn't necessarily fit the scenario that would be talking about my story in. For example, the way I wrote my script was really like poetic, it included a lot of metaphoric descriptions, which fits more in like a written style, but it doesn't necessarily fit into verbally delivering to your audience. So I had to modify those parts and cut out all the details that's not necessary and stick to a very concise and clear script. So it was definitely a little bit difficult at the beginning, but after the second and the third draft, I felt that I started to grasp what the coaches were looking for.
Do you think that like the reiterating, practicing ended up enhancing the final product at the end of the day?
Definitely. When I was writing out the second or the third draft, I started to have the voice of you and Stephanie, for example, at the back of my mind, saying that, like,
sorry about that.
like these suggestions saying that, oh, like this is too descriptive, this is not necessary, and this is what we want, like what would make your story more compelling and more memorable. And I was able to factor in those suggestions naturally. So, yeah.
So, for the audience, those Story Lab participants that apply and get accepted to share their story at the showcase receive coaching from two leadership and storytelling coaches, one of them being Stephanie, for that name drop. And you do have to apply. You do have to say, hey, I want to do this. And so I'm curious, what was the catalyst for you saying, I want to do this?
I love that question. So I fell in love with public speaking since the beginning of college. And since then, one of my life goals is to become this public speaking or storytelling master who is able to be very flexible in terms of talking about different topics in front of different audiences. So as soon as I heard about this opportunity, I thought to myself, wow, this is the perfect chance for me. And plus, my research focus in the psychology department is actually on storytelling. So I felt it would be a very interesting experience to listen to other people's stories and to learn about how people construct stories and how we are trained to construct stories.
So I'm hearing a little bit learning by doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Really getting yourself in the process. Yep. That's a really interesting lens of, I study this. This is what I am learning in school as a PhD student. Yep. Go you. From learning about how to craft and deliver a story during the Story Lab retreats and building on that story to prepare for actually delivering it to an audience. Did you take away anything that enhances, contributes to your learning as a PhD student?
I think coming up with a message, a theme, and like a moral behind the story was something that really connected to what I read in my research. For example, one thing I learned about the research on narratives is that in American culture, people love to wrap a story up with a really positive ending or something that they can generalize from that experience. And this is something that's very pervasive and appreciated in this culture. So as I was crafting my story and trying to come up with a message behind the story. I could really relate to that part of the culture. Like, oh, this is what connects to the papers that I've been reading about having this redemption story, and linking that to drawing a connections between the self and the event that we experienced. So I feel like when I was writing and talking about the message, it really spoke to me. In terms of the storytelling process, one thing I definitely learned was that delivering that story on a stage, like in an auditorium like that, is very different from practicing at home or thinking about it in your head and writing, just imagining yourself talking to people, because you really have to amplify your tone, your gestures, your facial expressions, because the space is so huge. And at the same time is much more difficult than I thought the first time that I practiced on stage, because the stage is so immense and you feel like there's this invisible pressure that's like forcing onto you when you're under the spotlight in front of so many people. So I guess that was a really novel and interesting thing that I learned about public speaking.
So you just mentioned certain core components of a story, one of them being the morals, the takeaways, redemptions. All that in mind, all of the research you're applying to share your story at the showcase. Why that story? What made you choose a personal story about losing your handbag during a night out with friends?
So there are definitely a few factors that came into play. Well, first, it was a little bit hard to narrow it down to one single event, because usually when I talked about my story, it would be my life story, like spending a few years homeschooling and then starting to study abroad and my transformation through that. But that's a really broad and general lens of a story, right? So I did the first round of filtering by thinking about specific events that were really memorable. And I guess that memory just came to me because it happened less than a year ago. So a lot of the details were still very vivid. So I felt that it was very compatible with the storytelling. And I guess it possessed all the core components that I was looking for. It has a really dramatic shift, and it has like a really an up and down, and involved other characters, involved very strong emotions, and it involved my own personal evaluation of that event. So it just captured all the components that I was looking for.
Did you have any hesitations about sharing a story about a night out in West Hollywood?
So mostly I would say I was pretty comfortable sharing about the details of the story. But I guess the more vulnerable part would be to share the emotions that I was feeling throughout the event. There was this part of the story that kind of that I cursed a little bit to my friend, which and I was hesitant when I was thinking about whether I should factor that into my story. But then I realized that it's very real and it precisely delivered what I was feeling at that moment. So although I was not the most comfortable person to share this kind of intense emotions and words, but I feel like that really added a nice touch to the entire story. So at first it was a little bit uncomfortable, but eventually I kept telling myself that it serves the right purpose of storytelling. So,
and to me, it touches upon that authenticity factor.
Yep.
Maybe it's not, in the moment, in retrospect, maybe you would say something different or act differently, but in the moment, that's how you were feeling.
Yeah.
So it conveys that, I think, really well. Now that you've been through it, and I do want to say that this is a unique podcast episode because usually our storytellers are preparing and recording their stories for a podcast format. We're taking the audio from the live showcase and creating this podcast episode. So for students, for future Story Lab participants who are interested in, curious about sharing their story on stage in front of a live audience, what advice would you give them? What do you want them to know?
I guess I would tell them that this is a much more rewarding experience than anyone would expect. Because sometimes when we recall our memory just in our head, we might be missing some of the very precious details that we experienced at that moment. And of course, like thinking about the takeaway and the messages and performing the reflection as well is very rewarding. And the whole story crafting process was kind of like a mental traveling process that really allow you to savor the memorable moments of the story and then to generate this really meaningful message that you can hold on to for the rest of your life. I feel like I just want to communicate to people who are thinking about participating that this is a very, very meaningful experience. And of course, it teaches you a lot of other things like how to capture your audience attention, how to shape your story in a way that people can resonate to. So it has all these benefits and lessons that you can learn. So I would definitely recommend it.
Listening to your story, I really heard this theme of trust in the kindness of strangers, be open to the kindness of strangers. I'm wondering, is that the takeaway that you intended?
Yeah, I would say trust is a huge part of it. Because I feel like in our lives, we meet all different kinds of people. And I feel like what that night taught me was that it was really dramatic, right? Like I had someone who stole my bag, my passport, and then I met someone who kindly returned the passport to me. So I guess the main takeaway would be that you need to have more faith in humanity. I know like sometimes it can be very devastating when you meet the wrong person at the wrong time, and at that moment where you are consumed by the emotions, it might feel like there's no hope to humanity. Like people are vicious, they can hurt you, they can do really hurtful things. But at the same time, we need to see this from a positive light too, because simultaneously there are incredible people in this world that can help you and have great kindness to deliver to you. So yeah,
I think that's really important to remember. Yeah. Alfred, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. For any of our listeners currently enrolled at the University of Michigan, we hope to see you at a future Story Lab event. Story Lab retreats, where students workshop the art and architecture of story development and delivery, are offered twice during the fall and winter semesters. If you want to learn more about Story Lab, please go to our website at sanger.umich.edu. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this episode, but your reflection on the topic doesn't have to end here. Make sure you visit our website at mlead.umich.edu/breakaway. There, you will find the discussion questions as well as more information about our guests. You will also find more episodes in the series there. Please don't forget to leave feedback wherever you listen to podcasts. And finally, on behalf of the Michigan Leadership Collaborative, please take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening, and go Blue.